From the tender age of 9, my life took an unexpected and profoundly painful turn. The sudden, heartbreaking loss of my mother, my anchor and confidant, plunged my world into an incomprehensible chaos. She was the very essence of safety and normalcy, and with her gone, that comforting foundation crumbled into dust. My father, Mike, then in his mid-30s, now 47, was, I hoped, going to be the steadfast presence who would keep our shattered lives from completely unraveling. I clung to the naive belief that he, being my father, would naturally rise to the occasion, becoming the resilient pillar I so desperately needed. This hope, however, proved to be a cruel illusion. For a brief, deceptive period, life maintained a fragile semblance of order. It was just the two of us, a father and daughter adrift, attempting to forge a new routine in the wake of immense grief. He'd dutifully drive me to school, and we'd share quiet dinners, each meal a testament to our fractured existence. It wasn't idyllic, certainly, but it wasn't utterly desolate either. This delicate balance, however, was destined to be short-lived. Approximately a year after my mother's passing, a new figure emerged in our lives, Jane. My initial understanding of her was limited to the fact that she was 12 years my father's junior, placing her at 35. I vividly recall the initial evening she graced our home for dinner. She presented herself as amiable enough, and in my youthful innocence, I saw no immediate cause for alarm. Yet, in hindsight, the subtle, insidious warning signs were present from that very first encounter, whispering of the storm that was to come. Jane wasted no time solidifying her presence once her relationship with my father intensified. It wasn't long before her daughter, Betty, then 17, joined her. Betty, I quickly learned, was the embodiment of privilege and self-indulgence. From the instant they crossed our threshold, they exuded an aura of ownership, as though our home had always been theirs. Jane, with an alarming swiftness, usurped the role of matriarch, effortlessly taking command of our domestic sphere without so much as a perfunctory attempt to include me. My father, in a bewildering display of passivity, simply acquiesced to her every whim. As a mere child of 9, still grappling with the raw agony of my mother's absence, I found myself utterly unprepared to navigate this seismic shift in my world. Yet the transformation in my father was stark and immediate. He ceased to be the dad I had known. Instead, Jane became his singular focus, his paramount concern. My existence, it seemed, was relegated to the periphery. I was present, yes, a physical entity within the confines of our house, but my significance, my emotional needs, were rendered invisible. The erosion of my standing within my own home progressed with unsettling speed. The expectation of empathy and understanding, particularly after enduring the profound loss of my mother, seemed a logical assumption from both my father and Jane. Yet it was a hope cruelly dashed. Instead, their treatment of me transmuted from that of a cherished family member to something disturbingly akin to a domestic servant. Jane, with an almost deliberate cruelty, lavished all her attention upon Betty, while I was burdened with an ever-increasing litany of household chores. Any attempt to voice my discontent was swiftly met with a dismissive wave, the implicit message being that this was simply the new, immutable order of things. The relentless cycle of cleaning up after Betty became an infuriating constant. Despite her age of 17, her habits mirrored those of a petulant toddler, leaving a trail of disarray in her wake, which invariably fell to me to rectify. Betty would be out with her friends, or languidly engrossed in television, while I, a child of 9, was immersed in the tedious drudgery of dishwashing, vacuuming, or whatever menial task Jane saw fit to impose. My father, in a chilling display of detachment, remained inert, seemingly oblivious to the glaring injustice unfolding before his eyes. His complicity, his silent endorsement of his 9-year-old daughter being treated as a housekeeper, was an inexplicable wound. I grappled with the incomprehension of his acceptance, yet simultaneously, I lacked the emotional arsenal to articulate my distress. But the true nadir, the moment that irrevocably seared itself into my memory, was the Christmas trip. Even now, the mere recollection ignites a furious inferno within me. That year, my father, Jane, and Betty orchestrated a festive escape. A lavish vacation to what I gathered was a picturesque cabin nestled amidst the snow-capped mountains. A flicker of hope, however fleeting, ignited within me. It was Christmas after all, a time synonymous with familial togetherness. Surely, I would be included. This fragile hope was brutally extinguished. I was informed, with a chilling casualness, that my designated role was to remain at home and care for Betty's dog, Max. They had, with an astonishing lack of compunction, chosen to abandon me, a mere child, for the sake of a pet, while they embarked on their opulent holiday. Let me unequivocally state that I adore animals. Max, to his credit, was a good-natured canine, but he was not my dog, he was Betty's. I timidly suggested alternative arrangements, a boarding facility, a professional pet sitter, but Jane, with characteristic abruptness, summarily dismissed my proposals. Her retort was laced with an infuriating rationality. Such expenditures were a waste of money, and I, being perfectly capable, was to assume sole responsibility for the house and the dog for a period of 3 days. I was, I reiterate, 9 years old, and they had left me utterly alone to safeguard their property and attend to their pet, while they revelled in their carefree escapade. I remember the profound desolation that enveloped me that first night. Huddled in the cavernous silence of the living room, a maelstrom of fear, sorrow, and simmering rage churned within me. It was Christmas, for crying out loud. Instead of the comforting embrace of my family, I was marooned at home, tending to a hyperactive dog that wasn't even mine. The conviction that my father no longer cherished me, that I was an unwelcome appendage to his newly formed family, solidified into a painful certainty. The most searing wound, however, was the stark realization of my father's complicity. He offered no resistance, no plea for my inclusion, simply succumbing to Jane's desires, which unequivocally dictated my exclusion. That Christmas marked a pivotal, agonizing turning point. From that desolate moment onward, an ever-widening chasm opened between my father and me. The man I had once revered, the figure of unwavering strength, was gone, replaced by a malleable entity who allowed Jane to dictate every aspect of our lives, leaving me perpetually at the mercy of their indifference. Every subsequent holiday, every familial gathering, became a theatre for Jane and Betty's dominance, with me relegated to a silent, unseen role, perpetually expected to conform to their whims. In retrospect, I yearn for the courage I lacked then, the voice to articulate my profound distress. But at 9 years old, what recourse did I possess? I was bereft of the words, the emotional fortitude, to confront either my father or Jane. I simply absorbed the injustices, a silent recipient of their neglect, a passivity that undoubtedly fueled the escalating deterioration of my childhood. Yet, amidst this encroaching darkness, a beacon of hope flickered. I was not entirely alone. Following that wretched Christmas, my Aunt Sarah, my mother's sister, along with my cousin Danny, materialized as guardian angels. Having been apprised of my plight, they made it their sacred mission to soothe my wounded spirit. They arrived laden with Christmas presents, meticulously prepared a lavish dinner, transforming the desolate aftermath into a belated, yet deeply felt, celebration. Danny, with an unwavering kindness, even chose to stay over, offering invaluable assistance with Max, a gesture of pure altruism. It was in these moments that a profound realization dawned upon me. My true family was not defined by the confines of shared blood or a common roof, but by the unwavering commitment of those who genuinely cared. Aunt Sarah and Danny became my steadfast anchors, their presence a silent rebuke to the neglect I endured. They had no obligation to intervene, yet they did, a selfless act that etched itself into the very fabric of my being. Without their steadfast support, I cannot fathom how I would have navigated the long, desolate years of feeling utterly insignificant. That Christmas, in its stark contrast of cruelty and compassion, illuminated the undeniable truth of who my real family truly was. And it was unequivocally not my father or Jane. After the emotional wreckage of that Christmas, a conscious, deliberate distance began to form between my father and me. How could it not? It felt as though he had irrevocably chosen his side, and it was not mine. But the narrative of my childhood, of my fractured family, held more layers of pain and disappointment. The events that unfolded subsequently only served to reinforce the crushing reality that I would never truly be regarded as part of their family. My relationship with Jane, far from improving, spiraled into an even deeper abyss of resentment. She settled comfortably into her self-appointed role as the undisputed empress of our household, a position that, for me, translated directly into an escalating burden of responsibilities. By the time I reached the age of 12, I was the sole custodian of our domestic order. Laundry, dishes, vacuuming, every conceivable household chore fell squarely upon my small shoulders. And with each weary plea for assistance, Jane would respond with a saccharine smile and a cutting remark. "It's good practice for when you have your own home one day." The sheer absurdity of her statement, directed at a 12-year-old who barely knew how to prepare her own meals, yet was expected to maintain an immaculate house, was infuriating. Betty, conversely, remained enshrined as the golden child, forever exempt from the mundane realities of domestic life. By the time my father and Jane formalized their union, Betty was 17 and possessed an uncanny ability to manipulate her mother with effortless precision. Whenever Jane appeared on the verge of assigning her a task, Betty would conjure a convenient excuse with miraculous speed: homework emergencies, pressing social engagements, or some vaguely defined, vital commitment. And each time, Jane would predictably capitulate, her disciplinary resolve dissolving into a puddle of indulgence. Meanwhile, I, with resentful hands, would be scrubbing floors or clearing away the remnants of their seemingly joyous family dinners. It was as if their collective expectation was for me to seamlessly integrate into the background, a silent, unpaid domestic drone. But what truly ignited a simmering fury within me was my father's unwavering inaction. He would sit, immersed in the glow of the television, a silent observer as Jane's imperious commands rained down upon me, treating me with the condescending air reserved for a mere servant. Not once did he intervene. Not a single word of protest escaped his lips, no gentle suggestion that Betty, or even Jane, might contribute. I remained agonizingly uncertain whether his silence stemmed from a profound fear of Jane or a chilling indifference towards my plight. Either way, the wound he inflicted through his inaction was deep and festering. At the age of 14, I, with a sudden surge of youthful audacity, attempted to confront him. I articulated, as best I could, the glaring injustice of my solitary labor, while Betty remained perpetually idle. His response, delivered with a casual indifference that pierced my adolescent heart, was a dismissive, "Life's not always fair, you just have to deal with it." That was it. No flicker of empathy, no attempt at understanding. Just a cold, unfeeling dictate to deal with it. After that conversation, a profound resignation settled over me. I abandoned all hope of ever expecting anything different from him. However, it was at this juncture that Aunt Sarah and Danny re-entered my narrative, not as fleeting visitors, but as a consistent, unwavering presence. Their post-Christmas intervention was not a one-off act of kindness. They became steadfast pillars in my life. Aunt Sarah consistently materialized for birthdays, holidays, and even spontaneous weekend visits, her sole purpose to check on my well-being. Danny, too, was a constant, comforting presence. Despite being a few years my senior, our bond deepened into an unbreakable kinship. She became the older sister I had always yearned for, a confidant and a sanctuary. Aunt Sarah's home became my refuge, a welcome respite from Jane's incessant criticisms and Betty's ingrained slovenliness. Danny would spirit me away for ice cream, we'd embark on impromptu shopping expeditions, or simply immerse ourselves in the escapism of binge-watching television shows. She was the first person with whom I felt a genuine freedom to articulate the labyrinthine struggles of my home life. She understood the crushing weight of my circumstances, and never once did she dismiss my feelings as overly dramatic or exaggerated. One particular weekend, when I was 16, staying at Aunt Sarah's, Danny and I found ourselves deep in conversation about the deteriorating conditions at home. I vividly recall recounting how Jane had, with disproportionate fury, reprimanded me for not folding laundry with sufficient speed. It was a trivial incident, yet it had lodged itself in my heart, a painful testament to my perpetual inadequacy in their eyes. Danny, with a quiet intensity, looked at me and said, "You know this isn't normal, right? You're not supposed to be treated like this." Her words, delivered with such gentle conviction, struck me with an unexpected force. I had spent so many years immersed in the pervasive belief that this dysfunctional existence was simply life, that I had become utterly blind to the profound unfairness of it all. Aunt Sarah and Danny had always extended kindness, but it was in that precise moment that the stark contrast between their genuine care and the emotional barrenness of my home became blindingly apparent. A profound realization clicked within my mind. My life could be vastly different if I were not tethered to that suffocating house, perpetually bound by the whims of Jane and the indifference of my father. That conversation served as a profound catalyst. The incessant need to appease Jane, the desperate, futile attempts to elicit understanding from my father, began to dissipate. My focus shifted inward, towards my academic pursuits, towards the liberating camaraderie of Danny's company, and towards the quiet cultivation of my own nascent self. The chores, an inescapable reality, remained, but their emotional impact lessened. I adopted a strategy of silent endurance, a persistent whisper of hope that one day I would escape, and I was right. The day I turned 18, a profound sense of liberation washed over me. I had secured admission to college with a full scholarship, a golden ticket to a life unburdened by their constant demands. I was not about to squander this hard-won freedom. The morning I departed for school, Jane offered a perfunctory, half-hearted good luck before swiftly reverting to her own preoccupations. Betty, predictably, displayed an equal measure of indifference. My father, however, presented a surprising tableau of genuine sadness. He embraced me, an embrace that felt like the first in years, and uttered words of pride, a pronouncement that, after all the years of neglect, held little emotional resonance for me. My sole focus was the intoxicating prospect of finally escaping that suffocating house. College, a vibrant, unfamiliar world, became my sanctuary. I embarked on a journey of self-discovery, forging new friendships, and finally, truly living, unburdened by the crushing weight of being perceived as a burden or a mere domestic appendage. Aunt Sarah and Danny remained my unwavering champions, showering me with thoughtful care packages and visiting whenever their schedules permitted. In truth, they were the only family I genuinely acknowledged or desired at that point. But, as if drawn by an invisible thread, Jane and Betty's penchant for drama found a way to infiltrate my newfound peace. Midway through my inaugural semester, a call from my father interrupted my studies. He conveyed, with an air of forced sincerity, that Jane and Betty had discussed the upcoming holidays and believed it would be a good idea for me to return home. He presented it as a magnanimous olive branch, a belated attempt to embrace me as a bona fide family member. I was, however, not so easily swayed. I could discern Jane's manipulative whispers in the background, dictating his script. Her true motive, undeniably, was a desire for an unpaid assistant for holiday preparations. I was not about to fall back into that insidious trap. I calmly informed him that my holiday plans involved Aunt Sarah and Danny, a declaration that left no room for negotiation. He offered a resigned sigh, a perfunctory, "Okay, maybe next time," but I knew, with an unwavering certainty, that there would be no next time. My attempts to mend fences with my father and Jane were irrevocably over. They had squandered their opportunities, and I, finally, had found my true family, Aunt Sarah, Danny, and the burgeoning life I was meticulously constructing for myself. The overarching lesson, therefore, is profoundly clear. Sometimes, the people to whom you are biologically bound are not the ones who ultimately constitute your true family. Instead, it is those who, with unwavering selflessness, step into the void when all others have abandoned you. This, precisely, is the indelible legacy of Aunt Sarah and Danny. After navigating the turbulent waters of my past with Jane and my father, one might reasonably assume that a period of much-deserved tranquility would follow. I had, after all, decisively thwarted their scheme to compel me into supporting Betty, and I had exited that coffee shop convinced that I had severed ties with them for good. Yet life, in its perverse wisdom, had no intention of granting me such an easy reprieve. Several months following that definitive confrontation, I found myself on the precipice of graduating college. A promising job awaited me upon graduation, and the trajectory of my life seemed unequivocally positive. Aunt Sarah and Danny remained my unwavering bedrock, and I felt a profound sense of contentment with the direction my life was taking. I had consciously severed all communication with Jane and Betty, and the liberation from their incessant drama had proven to be a deeply therapeutic act. But with the unsettling predictability of a ticking clock, just as I believed a period of calm had settled, my father re-emerged. I was immersed in the intensity of final exams when a text message from him arrived. I hadn't heard from him since that awkward coffee shop encounter, and his name appearing on my phone screen immediately triggered a silent, foreboding question. What now? The message was terse, devoid of explanation, simply a laconic request. Hey, we need to talk. I wrestled with the urge to simply ignore it, but a small, persistent flicker of hope, however illogical, whispered that perhaps, just perhaps, he intended to offer an apology. So, against my better judgment, I responded, agreeing to meet. We converged at the familiar coffee shop, the same neutral ground as our previous encounter. I half expected Jane to be seated beside him, her presence a tangible reinforcement of their united front, but she was conspicuously absent. It was just him, alone at the table, a profoundly weary figure, visibly aged beyond my last recollection. A pallor of exhaustion draped over him, and the weary lines etched into his face conveyed a silent premonition. Whatever he was about to articulate, it would not be good news. The customary awkward small talk unfolded, each word laced with a palpable tension. I sensed his nervousness, a disquietude that permeated the air between us. Finally, after a few strained minutes, he articulated the reason for our meeting with a quiet solemnity. Betty's in trouble, he confessed, his voice barely above a whisper, his gaze fixed on his coffee cup. And I don't know what to do. My stomach lurched. Here we go again. What kind of trouble? I queried, already steeling myself for the inevitable ridiculousness that was sure to follow. She dropped out of school, he admitted, his eyes still fixed on the swirling liquid in his cup. She couldn't keep up with her classes, and she's been making some bad decisions. Allow me to interject here. When he uttered the phrase, bad decisions, I understood with absolute clarity his underlying meaning. Betty had always possessed an uncanny propensity for making imprudent choices, always with the implicit expectation that someone else would invariably appear to clean up the ensuing mess. A chilling certainty settled over me. This time, they hoped that someone would be me. She's staying with us right now, my father continued, his voice heavy with resignation. But Jane and we can't keep bailing her out. She's racked up a lot of debt, and we're not sure how much longer we can keep helping her. I simply stared at him, my silence, a deliberate challenge, waiting for the inevitable punchline. The direction of this conversation was excruciatingly transparent, but I refused to make it easy for him. Okay, I said, my voice deliberately slow and even. And what does that have to do with me? He finally lifted his gaze to meet mine, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I witnessed a raw, unvarnished desperation in his eyes. We were hoping you could help her out, he pleaded, his voice tinged with a desperate hope. You've got that new job lined up, and you're in a better position to give her a hand. There it was, the moment I had anticipated, dreaded, since the instant his name had illuminated my phone screen. They wanted me to rescue Betty, again. I drew a slow, deliberate breath, striving to maintain a facade of composure. Dad, I began, my voice unwavering. I don't know how many times I have to say this, but I am not responsible for Betty. She has made her choices, and if those choices have led her to a difficult situation, that is entirely on her. I have worked tirelessly to achieve my current position, and I am not about to jeopardize that to clean up her mess. He remained silent, his gaze fixed on his coffee, as if searching for the precise words to disarm my resolve. Finally, he exhaled a weary sigh. I understand, I really do, but she's your sister. That was it. That innocuous phrase, delivered with such innocent simplicity, proved to be my breaking point. The dam holding back years of suppressed resentment finally burst. She's not my sister. I snapped, my voice resonating louder than I had intended, laced with an intensity that surprised even myself. She has never been my sister. From the moment Jane entered our lives, you and she made it abundantly clear that Betty was the priority. I was never truly part of this family. I was the one cleaning up after her, the one left behind while you all embarked on your vacations. And now you expect me to save her? No, absolutely not. He looked genuinely shocked, as though he had never anticipated such a direct, unvarnished confrontation. But I was not finished. You and Jane made your choices too. You chose to prioritize Betty, to make her your sole focus, and I accepted that a long time ago. But now, you are going to have to live with the consequences of those choices. I am not going to be your backup plan. If you wish to help her, by all means, do so, but do not expect me to be a part of it. The silence that descended between us was thick, oppressive. I could discern the flicker of hurt in his eyes, yet I felt no remorse for the words I had uttered. For the first time, I had unequivocally asserted myself, and the feeling was profoundly liberating. Eventually, he offered a slow, deliberate nod, as if the full weight of my words had finally penetrated his understanding. "I'm sorry," he murmured, his voice hushed. "I didn't realize how much we hurt you." I offered no response. What was there to say? An apology, however belated, possessed no power to alter the irrevocable past. And at this juncture, I harbored no desire to mend what was irrevocably broken. I simply wished to move forward with my life. We finished our coffees in a heavy, unspoken silence. As we departed the coffee shop, a silent understanding settled between us. This was, in all likelihood, the final meaningful conversation we would ever share. It wasn't a clean surgical break, but it was a definitive one. The anger that had simmered within me for so long had finally dissipated, replaced by a profound sense of peace. I was done with the manipulative guilt trips, the subtle coercions, the perpetual expectation that I was somehow obligated to rectify their problems. Following that meeting, I graduated, commenced my new career, and continued to forge my own path. Aunt Sarah and Danny remained my unwavering constants, the only family I truly needed or desired. Betty's fate remained unknown to me, and frankly, I felt no compulsion to ascertain it. She had made her choices, and now she bore the responsibility for their consequences. As for my father, I have not heard from him since that day in the coffee shop. Perhaps he has finally comprehended that I am not the safety net they presumed me to be. Or perhaps the weight of his own regret has rendered him incapable of reaching out. Either way, I am at peace.